Provincial elections in Alberta always used to be foregone conclusions. For 44 straight years, the Conservatives always won big. Not so this past Monday night when the United Conservatives just eked out a narrow majority government win as the New Democrats showed a lot of moxie. Here to unpack it all, let's welcome in Calgary, Alberta, political analyst and PhD candidate at the University of Calgary. There's Jason Ribeiro. Jason, good to have you on our program. Let me just, as I welcome you here, ask our director, Sheldon Osmond, to bring up the results. We got a graphic here with the results of the UCP's majority government win, but it was a tight one. 49-seat victory the other night, 926,000 plus votes for a 52.6% share of the total vote, compared to the New Democrats, who got 38 seats. That's the biggest opposition seat count in Alberta history. On the strength of 776,000 plus votes, a 44% share, which in Ontario, 44% would have got you a massive majority government. Those numbers may dance around a little bit because I know there's a few seats where they're asking for recounts, but what do you think Albertans essentially were saying the other night with those results?
Well, they're telling the not only Alberta but the rest of the country that we haven't sort of figured out, what kind of province we are. Throw out the traditional lore of this being a conservative stronghold province that's going to be traditionally blue, but also, throw out the notion that despite all of the challenges that this conservative government has faced over the last 4 years, that they're ready to throw them out over it. So you're seeing historic gains, you're seeing demographic changes also play a factor here, but then you're also seeing the nitty-gritty of campaign tactics. The NDP, placing a huge emphasis on Calgary, particularly as the UCP was going through its own leadership election, got a bit of a jump and just squeaked over some battleground ridings, but wasn't enough to carry the day. I think the story of what this means for Alberta is going to still be being written over the next weeks and months and potentially years to come.
For sure. The NDP did sweep Edmonton. They got a lot of seats in Calgary, unlike last time. Danielle Smith, the Premier, who remains Premier, she did win, but she got 100,000 fewer votes this time compared to last time. Where do you think those people went?
I think they stayed home. Even though our turnout was, plus 60%, wasn't the 70% that you saw in 2019, where you had a very motivated province and citizenry come to the table, especially after a few years of economic tumult, to elect Jason Kenney to a large majority government. This time around, the polarization, the intense, I think, clear contrast between the choices of Team Orange and Team Blue, forced a lot of people to stay home. And as you saw the undecided be a large chunk of the electorate in poll after poll after poll, the traditional thinking is probably start to think of them as non-voters. It seems that either voting for the NDP or the UCP was a bridge too far for some folks.
One of the anomalies of our first-past-the-post system is that sometimes the number of votes you get does not always translate into the number of seats you get exactly. And I raise that because Rachel Notley actually got more votes this time than she did 8 years ago when she won a majority government. But the votes split differently this time. What do you think prevented her? She clearly had a good campaign, good enough to knock Danielle Smith off her perch a little bit. But what prevented her from victory, do you think?
Well, look, I think it's a few things. One, ceding the entirety of rural Alberta to one party means you're already starting on the back foot, right? And the UCP's stronghold kept. They didn't splinter off into any of the other farther to the right leaning parties. That conservative coalition, I've always said, even though there's infighting during a period of governance, when the quote unquote enemy is common, as it was here, they pretty much fall into line and coalesce. I think that, was an impediment to Rachel Notley. I think the second part is that despite the fact that it looked all good from the outside, while candidates were strong on the ground, knocking doors, pounding pavement, making calls, I think that the macro campaign for the NDP lacked a certain oomph. They'd mirrored some of the UCP policies. They'd moved farther into the center. And I think that didn't lead to a lot of inspiration in their base, even though they were united, and didn't call enough people over from the UCP in 2019 to come vote for them. Those folks stayed home. And I think also those folks did not, show up in droves. What it actually ended up doing was coalescing the Alberta Liberals, the Alberta Party. Basically, what Rachel Notley can hang her hat on is that she's, essentially defined this province as a two-party province now. Jason Kenney did it in 2019 by bridging the Wild Rose and the PCs together. Rachel Notley has consumed or assumed all of those remaining sort of center-left to left parties under her banner. There's something to take there for the future.
Now, not every provincial election has national implications, but to be sure, Alberta elections do. Premier Smith's victory, what do you think that portends for national politics?
I wish I could tell you, this is which Danielle Smith do I believe? During the, before her run in politics, when she had taken a break after being ousted as Wild Rose leader some years ago, she's waxed poetic about a number of issues and topics as a broadcaster, as a podcaster, as a business, quote unquote, advocate. And then she very much took aim at Ottawa during her leadership election. That softened. That softened when she became the premier. And so all of a sudden, the Sovereignty Act, which was this critical piece of legislation that she was going to shove in Justin Trudeau's face, all of a sudden got watered down. All of the rhetoric got tampered down. With a thin majority, does this embolden her to think of it as a big majority? Or does it allow her to keep in this tempered realm where they're working together on healthcare and have secured historic funding, where they're going to work together on things that matter to Albertans like childcare and the like? And certainly, the federal government has invested a heavy amount of loans and debt and resources into our energy sector. Does this become a more productive relationship, or does, that famous image of Jason Kenney putting his finger in Justin Trudeau's face become the image that also Danielle Smith wears in the years to come from a governance perspective?
Maybe you could help an Ontario audience understand this, because my suspicion is that if a party leader in this province had compared people who take the COVID vaccination to blind supporters of Adolf Hitler, or who had a candidate say some rather unfortunate things about some people in our society, enough so that Premier Smith has now kicked her out of caucus and said, even though she won, she will not sit in the Conservative caucus. There'd be some problems with that. You'd wonder how a candidate who had done all that could win an election. Can you explain to us how, in spite of all of her malapropisms, she somehow still managed a majority win?
Yeah, and as a former Ontarian myself, I can shed some light here and bridge some of those gaps. I think this is hugely challenging. She has said things that I think were not only a bridge too far from folks that prevented her from getting a larger majority, but I know that she's said things that even the diehard, true blue conservatives are saying it's a bridge too far. The challenge is, though, there's this equivocation between what Rachel Notley has said about the energy sector, what her candidates have said, that places them into a quandary. And many of them are still breaking towards Danielle Smith. Candidates in their own ridings were saying, listen, if she gets a thin majority or the margin isn't there, she may be out, even if she wins this election. The fact that, some of these candidates were campaigning against the statements that she'd made very directly, I think it makes for a bizarre mix heading into an election. But I think this is one of the most, impressive, but also disheartening political comebacks in modern Canadian political history. And I don't think it says something specifically about Albertans, let's be clear. There were droves of people who did not vote for Danielle Smith, not just based on policy, not just based on ideology, based on the backs of those statements. Civic society, civil society here condemned all of those statements. I was personally offended by those statements. But for some, the trade-off between inflation, affordability, cost of living, some of the issues where the UCP pulled the strongest, for many of them, I do feel it places them in a bit of a quandary. It places generational feelings about voting blue your whole life into perspective. And for everyone that hasn't made that step to vote for a different party, especially one that is painted as the enemy or painted as being on the farthest end of the spectrum, I can empathize and understand why that is such a challenge, and whether that leads to them holding their nose and still voting blue or staying home for this election.
Well, let me do a little comparing and contrasting here, because in the last decade, Ontario's had 2 premiers and Alberta has had 6. 6 premiers in the last 10 years. And one of the narratives I heard during the course of the Alberta election campaign was, put the Conservatives back in power and don't worry, Smith is going to self-destruct, we'll get rid of her and put somebody else in. And given how you kind of churn through premiers over the last decade, that had some credibility. First of all, you've heard that narrative, no doubt. Are you buying that's maybe what could take place in the next couple of years?
Well, history is a great precedent, right? So I wouldn't count that scenario out. I will say this: Danielle Smith became, incredibly disciplined during the campaign. Rachel Notley had a great opportunity to speak to Albertans during the debate. I think even folks within the progressive movement said that Danielle Smith won that debate handedly, relying on her years of broadcasting experience. But certainly, it's funny enough to say that the most stable tenure over the last decade or more from a premier's perspective is Rachel Notley. She's the only one to have finished her term, and so I don't think Danielle can look to a great UCP dynasty in the future, no more than Jason Kenney could, even though he had all of the support. The world is changing fast, and her ability to adapt, her ability to recover, and the amount of rope that folks within her own party are giving her, and Albertans more broadly, especially being shut out of one of the major cities in this province, means that she has a lot of work to do. If history is a precedent, it's not necessarily in her favor. And I think this is going to be the challenge between the optics and the reality. The analogy that I use has been the presidential election in 2016. Trump won very small by a very thin majority, acted like he had a majority. Let's see if Danielle Smith does that as well over the next 4 years if she makes it there.
Got about a minute and change left here to talk about Rachel Notley, and I'm intrigued by her situation because if someone had been premier, as she had been, and then she tried to get the job back but lost, you might expect to hear some people in her party saying, maybe it's time we try for a new leader, particularly since she's the longest-serving current member of the Legislative Assembly in Alberta. I'm picking up none of that. I'm hearing nothing about let's get rid of Rachel Notley. How come?
Well, their party is extremely united. They've been united for some time, especially as the divisions between the UCP opposite have been taking shape. It is a party, just like the UCP for a period of time was molded in Jason Kenney's image. So is the Alberta NDP. And while I know for a fact that calls are being made and people are sticking their necks out to be considered as a future or potential leader, if Rachel decides that she's not going anywhere, or at least for a period of time, she may be playing the calculus of saying exactly what you said prior. Danielle Smith may self-destruct. The UCP may fracture. This is a very thin majority where they will have to whip votes. Even one of the people that you counted as part of that thin majority is sitting as an independent outside of caucus, and they don't need to bring her in right now. I think they're going to wait and see what happens and see if there's anyone inside the party or potentially outside that could potentially fill Rachel Notley's shoes. But I don't think that that's an evident case right now.
Gotcha. Jason, it's good to meet you. We appreciate your time and your analysis on what was a most fascinating election, and we hope we'll see you again somewhere down the road. Jason Ribeiro, PhD candidate, University of Calgary, and a political analyst from out west. Thanks for joining us tonight here on TVO.
Thanks for having me.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.